Hi and welcome all to Sicily, for real this time. I told you that I wanted to do something special for this last episode and I decided to take my GoPro and take you all to a little trip into the historical center here in Enna, to show you where everything in this series on Sicily 3 happened. When I recorded this, it was a very special day here in Enna, the celebration known as Holy Friday, meant to commemorate the death of Jesus Christ. The whole Holy Week, from Holy Monday to Easter, is a very important time here in Enna, but Holy Friday is the most important. You see, we have this tradition called processione, meaning procession. Basically, there are these brotherhoods, or as we call them, confraternite, who organize these long religious marches throughout the whole city. And I know that seeing what they look like, you immediately thought of them. But in fact, this tradition is way more ancient. It was imported here in Sicily by the Spanish rulers, and in Spain they also have these events. And as a matter of fact, the Holy Week here in Enna is considered the second most important in the whole world, second only to the one in Sevilla. The Holy Friday is the only day of the Holy Week in which all brotherhoods march together in the longest procession, which begin at 5 p.m. and end at midnight or 1 a.m. It's truly a fascinating moment, full of Sicilian culture. I am not religious, but I love watching the procession, especially the ones in Enna, since in Enna the sad and grieving atmosphere is emphasized. After all, you have processions and celebrations like this in all of Sicily, but they are mostly celebrations. They're really loud with lots of music and smiles. But here in Enna, we don't actually celebrate, we grieve. And the procession is truly an act of self-sacrifice. You endure these long and tiring walks to feel close to the pain of Jesus. Now, in our own separate world in CK3, the Spanish never came to Sicily, so this tradition would not have been established there, but you know what? I think Zaccaria would have established something similar, given his zealous nature. After all, he was known as the Catholic. But let me show you something else. This is the Castle of Lombardy, the most important medieval building in the whole city. I'd love to say that Zaccaria, Umberto and Luca ruled from here, watching over the vast lands of Sicily from the towers of this castle. But unfortunately, this castle was built in 1130 by King Roger II, son of Roger I of the Hauteville dynasty. However, this castle sits on the foundations of way more ancient Sicilian fortifications, the one Zaccaria probably built upon, building what in that world would have probably been known as Castle Sturzo. And it's truly a fascinating relic which testifies this town's ancient history. It sits between the Cathedral of Enna, built in the 14th century, and the ancient pagan site of the Rock of Cerere, the Greek goddess of agriculture known by the Romans as Demeter, whose religion was really strong here in Enna. But I do not want to waste your time. This is not meant to be like a whole video, a whole vlog here in Enna. This is just the first part of this video. Now I have truly something special for you. A little project meant to celebrate the end of this series. A small, let's say, documentary that tells the story of the Kingdom of Sicily. Enjoy.
The Mediterranean Sea has always been a very important strategic place in Europe's history. A place in which people, kingdoms, religions and cultures of all kinds met and inevitably intertwined with each other forming true cultural compounds which shape not only the Mediterranean landscape but the very roots of Europe's history. At the center of this wonderful sea sits the island of Sicily, the true gem of the Mediterranean. Given its strategical position as the port that divides the two halves of the sea, numerous politic entities were interested in holding this rich land, ideal for agriculture. From the Greek colonizers to the Punics to the Romans to the Ostrogoths to the Greek of the Byzantine Empire, and then, in the 9th century, to the Arabs who conquered it. In the cracks of this rich history, the Sicilian people were always relegated in the shadows of their own lands by their colonizers and their oppressors. But everything changed in the year 1066, when a young, strong seed was sown in the Sicilian landscape, the seed that would eventually sprout in what we now know as the Kingdom of Sicily. In 1066 AD, the southern part of Italy was one of the most hot and politically unstable parts of Europe. Any kind of imperial influence, either German or Byzantine, was long gone. The Duchy of Benevento, the only remaining political entity still linked to the ancient Longobards, was under the Pope's rule. Apulia, Capua, Salerno and Calabria were controlled by the adventurous Norman rulers, who under the military power of Robert the Fox and his brother Roger of the Hauteville dynasty recently conquered Messina, setting foothold in the island of Sicily, which was controlled by the Arabs since the 9th century. The same Arabs who in 1066 lacked the capability to unite and form a strong central power in the island. Alone and fragmented in their counties, they waited in fear for Robert's next attack. Sicily had never been that divided. In this context of oppression and fear for the next wars, the seeds of rebellion sprouted in the most unlikely place, the lowly Count of Casriana. Known in ancient times as Enna, the fortifications that formed the barony of Casriana had always been an important strategic point in the island. Incredibly hard to siege, the town in the mountains was known by the Romans as the Urbs Inexpugnabilis. But the Arab Count Najib al-Wasid was weak and couldn't manage to hold his power. In January 1066, stricken by the rough winter, the peasants of Casriana asked for food and protection, but their count couldn't and wouldn't provide. And so the rebellion started. The peasants of the county united and revolted under a Sicilian banner, tired of the oppressed state that felt like it was written in their veins since centuries. They were but peasants, but among them one peasant shined the brightest. His name was Zaccaria. Still faithful to the Christian origins of Sicily, Zaccaria led the war against Najib al-Wasid, which finally came to an end in the 15th of September, and ended with the proclamation of the new ruler, Count Zaccaria, and the new county, which was given its original name, Enna. From his humble mountain, Zaccaria saw the vast lands of the island. He knew of the Norman threat and the fragility of the Arabs. He dreamed to reunite all Sicily under a single Sicilian banner. Zaccaria was but a peasant, of course, but his martial and administrative capabilities were without a doubt impressive. His zealous faith in Christ made him stand out from the previous Arab counts, and his diligent but humble personality made him the most lovable of leaders. He was a peasant leader though, and as such the trust of anyone but his fellow Sicilians had always been a hard thing to achieve. Once count, he founded a new noble house, the House of Sturzo, whose values of humility and diligence were meant to legitimate him as a leader and give him prestige. But to solidify his power and to link it to the land, he had to do more. Although the rage of the Sicilian people screamed for blood, Zaccaria decided to cooperate with the previous Arab ruling class. In exchange for conversions, he let them stay in his court, and in some cases he appointed them in special positions of his council. Zaccaria knew though that in the warfare state in which Sicily was, nothing was more important than prestige and legitimacy. To achieve his goals, he married a Greek woman named Constantine. She was but a peasant, but to Zaccaria it did not matter. He chose her for her intelligence. Her trusting and diligent nature made her perfect to compensate Zaccaria's poor diplomatic abilities. Her arrogance and assertive presence made her one of the most important political personalities in Sicily at the time. Although Sicily was historically linked to the Church of Constantinople, Zaccaria followed the teachings of the Church of Rome. Surely it was a spiritual choice given his zealous nature, but it was politically convenient as well. Sharing the same faith as the Normans meant giving them less reasons to attack the county of Enna, and Zaccaria knew that. It did not pass long since the marriage with Constantine was celebrated that Zaccaria decided to go on a pilgrimage to Rome in the court of the Pope Alexander II. A political voyage organized to impress the Normans and increase Zaccaria's prestige, but a spiritual one as well, described by Zaccaria's own account of the event, a paper that described his absolute astonishment in front of the marmoreal and powerful buildings of Rome. During that same pilgrimage, however, the Normans struck against the Arabs in the county of Balarm, in a war that declared the most prominent force in the island. The game of chess in Sicily between Zaccaria and Robert the Fox was the most important matter in the Count's politics. While one of his eye was turned to his family, to his wife who slowly became his soulmate, his other eye was instead turned to the neighbor lands of Siracusa and Malta. Knowing the importance of securing the lands before the Normans could, Zaccaria used his martial knowledge to conquer the islands of Malta in 1076 and the county of Siracusa in 1077, renamed Siracusa. A prosperous time for the peasant leader, which marked, with the siege of Siracusa, the end of the Arab rule in Sicily that lasted 2 centuries long. A period also in which the Sturzo house finally expanded with the birth of the children of Zaccaria, his firstborn and heir, Umberto, Beata, Fortunato, Augusta, Eugenio and Marianna. Although Robert the Fox could boast of a great army and lots of holdings, he could no longer deny the legitimacy of the rule of House Sturzo. Zaccaria, on his hand, had the diligent work of his chancellor Arsenius, who perfectly knew how to diplomatically interact with the Normans. He had more than half of the island in his holdings, the approval of the Pope, and a prosperous family on his back. His influence over Sicily and the Sicilian people was made clear in 1080, the year in which the complete fracture between Zaccaria and Robert the Fox was also made clear when Zaccaria welcomed in his court some Sicilian serfs who escaped from Robert's holding in Palermo. An insult towards the Norman ruler, which was intended to delegitimize the Hauteville claim on the island in favor of the Sicilian House of Sturzo. And it all finally culminated on the 13th of March 1082, the day in which Zaccaria Sturzo was proclaimed as the de facto Duke of Sicily. While the new Duke focused on developing his lands, the rule of Robert the Fox slowly came to an end. Left without male heirs, pushed from the south by the Islamic tribes of North Africa trying to take back the lands of Tunis, and in the north by the Holy Roman Empire and its conquest of the county of Lanciano, Robert died in 1086, leaving his daughter Matilda to rule in his lands in Apulia, Salerno and Sicily. However, Matilda didn't manage to gain the respect of her vassals, only living in the shadows of his father. The frail state of the Norman duchies left then a window for Zaccaria when Matilda was dragged into a civil war. With his 2 alliances, the Count of Urbojna and the Count of Iglesias, he seized the remaining land of Sicily, freeing once and for all the island. Now on the Sicilian shores, Zaccaria's eye went even farther to the lands of South Italy. The Norman duchies were all falling apart. There was not a central power in the lands who could guide the people. Although they were not Sicilians, Zaccaria felt like the people of South Italy were kin to him. Long were the time gone when he was but an illiterate peasant. Since then, he learned to write and read, and so he read the story of his land. The people of South Italy were united in history and culture, and so he dreamed of a united kingdom who could guide his people. And that dream became the dream of House Sturzo. To achieve it, Zaccaria knew that he had not to be alone, and so he planned his second pilgrimage, now directed to Cologne, in the heart of the Holy Roman Empire. He wanted to gain prestige from it, he wanted to attract the attention of the German rulers, he wanted to let all Europe know the importance of his rule in Sicily. And so he linked his realm with the eastern duchies of the Holy Roman Empire with strategic marriages, solidifying his web of alliances. Now strong with his alliances, boasting of the new united army of Sicily, Duke Zaccaria pushed his way upward in a new series of wars against the Normans in the lands of Calabria and Salerno. His plan was to give those lands to his second son, Fortunato, who was known as a cunning warrior and general. But Zaccaria's ambition eventually would have asked for something back. On the 9th of November 1104, in the Battle of Cosenza, Fortunato Sturzo was killed, severely injuring the integrity of House Sturzo and his leader's heart. Despite the tragic death, the wars were successful and the lands of Calabria and Salerno went to Fortunato's sons, first to Zaccaria II of Reggio Calabria and then to his brother Salvatore. And then, on the 4th of May 1105, something was clear. The Sturzo house was the most important family in all of South Italy. Their influence and power of the lands from Sicily to Benevento was unmatched. And so, a new kingdom was founded, the Kingdom of Sicily. And so, a king was crowned, King Zaccaria the Catholic. His rule as a king was short. It lasted 6 years. Years rigged with plagues in the kingdom, such as the Galluran pox and the Ossis fever, rigged with the king's grief for the death of his son Fortunato and his daughter Augusta in Bavary. But he still managed to rule his kingdom with an iron hand and a silk cloth. Loved by his family and his people, Zaccaria died of old age on the 20th of April 1111, leaving his kingdom in the hands of his trusted heir, now crowned King Umberto. Umberto, known to be humble like his father, was also known for his honest and gregarious way to interact with people of all social backgrounds, and so he was loved and praised for his diplomatic abilities, although his rule was plagued by controversies, risky wars, and diplomatic incidents. Umberto shared his father's dream, and so he continued pursuing it with a new series of wars against the Normans in Apulia and Capua. The alliance with Iglesias, though, brought to the Sicilian shores North African armies in 1115, a year in which King Umberto had to face a war on 2 fronts: the southern front against the North Africans and the northern front against Spoleto and its claim on Capua. Although Umberto, unlike his father, was not a commander, with the help of his brother's son Salvatore, he managed to successfully fend off both armies, managing to conquer Napoli too, and establish the now secular Republic of Capua. King Umberto was educated by his father, but he shared his mother's interest in diplomatic matters. His natural inclination towards diplomacy and the already established noble status of House Sturzo gave to King Umberto the confidence to pursue a more foreign-centered politic, which eventually led to the most controversial decision he ever made. Once his first wife, Tomasina Morosini, died, Umberto's eyes were quickly turned to the Duchy of Bohemia, recently become independent from the Holy Roman Empire thanks to the lead of its ruler, Duchess Jitka Bucic. It was just a matter of time until Jitka would have been crowned Queen of Bohemia, and she needed an husband to produce heirs for the kingdom. Umberto, for his part, was glad to put a Sturzo in the throne of Bohemia, and also felt the need to produce more offspring, since his first wife Tomasina only gave him one son, Luca, who was cursed with a frail body. And so the marriage was celebrated, and at first it was seen as the most genius diplomatic move made by King Umberto, a plan that, if successful, would have made House Sturzo as one of the most influential families in all of Europe. However, it did not pass long until this plan showed its flaws. A scandal erupted. The child about to be born from Queen Jitka was not the child of Umberto. Their father was a Czech noble, Dobromil von Arrak. Queen Jitka was an adulterer, and even though King Umberto couldn't possibly let that be forgotten, he still decided to do the best he could to ensure his alliance with Bohemia. He didn't ask for a divorce, he pardoned her, and tried to emotionally tie himself to the queen. The results, though, had always been uncertain, since Queen Jitka was still reluctant to abandon his lover Dobromil, and so the result of this diplomatic impasse was numerous births, probably way more numerous than Umberto hoped. Historical sources attest that it was around these years that King Umberto showed signs of what was called at those times possession. The old king was seen talking alone, speaking and listening to the alleged voices in his head. He often was stressed, troubled, alone to wander in his palace trying to keep a calm attitude. He most probably suffered of what we know now as schizophrenia. But what caused it? Was it the stress of the wars and the plagues? The constant doubt surrounding Jitka's pregnancies? Was it congenital? We will never know for certain. What we do know is that King Umberto didn't manage to keep the situation at bay and never ensured the actual familial status of his children. In 1124, the Holy Roman Empire declared war to seize the Duchy of Bohemia, threatening to destroy the newly founded kingdom. And in the midst of this war, in which Umberto had to help, his children were born. First, a daughter, Constantine, then the two twins, Fortunato and Zaccaria, and then a third son, Bohemunno. An hereditary crisis was about to strike and break the kingdom of Sicily. The Bohemian kids were to inherit not only Bohemia, but parts of the kingdom of Sicily too, threatening the inheritance of the firstborn Luca and the integrity of his kingdom. If not fixed, this crisis would have shattered the hopes to achieve the Sturzo dream of a united kingdom of South Italy. And things were to go even worse for King Umberto. In 1127, Queen Itka died giving birth to a bastard son, and left the kingdom of Bohemia and the war against the Holy Roman Empire in the still too young hands of Fortunato. A couple of months later, Pope Urbanus intervened. Worried of the mental and spiritual state of King Umberto, he threatened to seize the whole kingdom of Sicily, transforming it into a papal state. In 1129, Umberto became infirm, putting an end to the possibility of any kind of voyage and physical independence. The kingdom was a step away from destruction, and in this chaos, King Umberto decided to stop his diplomatic efforts and to disband the troops in Bohemia, factually leaving his son alone against the Holy Roman Empire. And so he secluded himself in his castle in Enna. His choices led the kingdom of Sicily, the kingdom his father created, onto a cliff. But one thing was clear to King Umberto. He wanted to fix this crisis, to ensure a solid continuity to his father's heritage. So, strong of the adulterous attitude of Queen Itka, King Umberto decided to disinherit the three Bohemian kids, favoring only his firstborn Luca. A choice that left the king in a sad state. Left infirm, full of regrets, King Umberto died from a seizure caused by its condition, the 21st of December 1132. And so, in these troubling times, King Luca ascended to the throne. However, at the moment of his father's death, he was imprisoned by the Holy Roman Emperor, captured during a siege in the war against Bohemia. He spent his first 2 years of rule in house arrests, finally being freed in 1134. Returned to his kingdom, one thing was clear to him. Luca wanted to fix his father's mistakes, putting above all else the stability of his kingdom and his family. Being honest and gregarious, just like his father, educated by him, Luca too showed an inclination towards diplomacy. This and his diligent nature, reminiscing of his grandfather's, made sure his vassals, his cousin Salvatore, Duke of Calabria and Salerno, and the Doge of Capua, easily swore fealty to him, trusting he would lead the kingdom into the harmonious state perpetrated by his grandfather, King Zaccaria. Luca made sure the trust he was given to was well placed. Using the instrument of pilgrimage, he made sure Pope Urbanus would change his mind on seizing the kingdom of Sicily. His marriage with Alduara Jimena brought him a strong alliance with the Kingdom of Castile, and his ties with Cagliari in Sardinia and with Bohemia were still strong. However, Luca, well cultured on his family history, knew that family, humility and diligence were the pillars that founded House Sturzo. And so, to fix the wrongdoing perpetrated by his father, he welcomed in his court his brothers Zaccaria, Bohemunno and later Fortunato, restoring their inheritance and reuniting the House Sturzo once again. However, just like his father, he had to face the challenges and trials caused by his own family. His firstborn and heir, the young Zaccaria, although tutored by Luca himself, showed no inclination towards any ability to rule. On the other hand, he showed to have a sinful nature, and in time he was known to be gluttonous, vengeful and craven. But King Luca did not want to make his father's mistakes. Although he could not let Zaccaria inherit the throne of Sicily, he chose to not disinherit him. Instead, he made sure to centralize his power and use his influence to designate another heir, his second son, Umberto. His plans, however, were faced with an enormous challenge in the year 1141, when the plague known as the camp fever expanded and erupted in Sicily. King Luca was infected, and in a single moment all hopes of a stabilized realm seemed vanished. It was around those years that King Luca showed an increasing interest towards medicine and health. His obsession for a cure mirrored his obsession for stability in his kingdom. an ironic obsession given the frail state of his body. Nonetheless, he rushed to make sure his eventual death would have been the least damaging for the rule of his sons. He entrusted Zaccaria with the counties of Syracuse and Apulia, and designated Melchior Eufemio as the regent of the young Umberto. But then, both his sons were also infected with a camp fever, and once again, Luca's hopes seemed shattered. His line seemed destined to die out, but when all hope seemed lost, something miraculous happened. King Luca, Zaccaria, and Umberto miraculously recovered. Although the camp fever damaged the realm, seemed to damage the mental health of the young Umberto and permanently put King Luca in an infirm state, the kingdom of Sicily survived and thrived even more thanks to the wise rule of his king. Trade ports, farms, fields, and military infrastructures were built under the orders of King Luca. The kingdom of Sicily had never been more powerful and stabilized. And finally, Luca could think about the future. Just like his father, he also shared the dream of Asturzo, and it was not that far to be achieved. The last remaining pieces of the Norman duchies were easy to seize. The true challenge was the county of Benevento, which had been a papal holding for centuries. Although the kingdom of Sicily was a high developed land, sitting as the gem of the Mediterranean Sea, he could not even think to challenge the Pope yet. And so the eyes of Luca were turned to the neighbor lands of North Africa. They were fragmented into different counties and duchies, ruled mostly by tribes, plagued by numerous wars. Luca also had to think about his brothers. Once restored their inheritance, it felt like he should have given them lands to rule. And so, a new series of wars were declared by the Kingdom of Sicily, to seize the lands of Sirte, Tripolitania, and the land surrounding the Sardinian holding of Tunis. The wars were successful. The lines of his brothers and his sons were entrusted with the numerous North African counties. A new reform of the army was passed, putting a heavy focus on pikemen and heavy cavalry. In the meanwhile, Duke Ascletin was defeated, and the county of Lecce was seized, ending the Norman presence in Italy once and for all. Luca's rule and politics were proven to be successful and extremely beneficial for the kingdom. It was ironic that, due to the frail state of his body, he came to be known as King Luca the Weak. But this seemed to not bother him as he focused to plan his most important war, the war for the county of Benevento against the new Pope, Sylvester IV. Luca prepared his realm, accumulating a fortune worth of one of the richest kingdoms in the Mediterranean, and waited for the right moment, which came in 1166, when Pope Sylvester IV declared a crusade for the Kingdom of Egypt. Although he financially helped the crusade, Luca's plan was clear. While the papal army was busy in Egypt, Luca took the chance and declared war on the 13th of March 1168. His fortune made him organize an impressive army made of well-trained Sicilian knights and bands of Sicilian mercenaries, and with that army he quickly seized the county of Benevento, and then pushed forward in the county of Tivoli, trying to put pressure onto the Pope. However, the papal army quickly returned from Egypt, and disembarking to the shores of Apulia, managed to seize back Benevento. The war lasted 2 years, plaguing the Apennines Mountains and the monetary resources of both the Pope and King Luca. It all ended on the 3rd of October 1170, with what is now known as the Battle of Capua, the biggest battle that South Italy had ever known, a battle that saw King Luca the Weak as the winner and the rightful ruler of Benevento and the whole Kingdom of Sicily. Despite the war, the feelings between King Luca and Pope Sylvester were not hostile. The Pope declared him the rightful King of Sicily and accepted the defeat. On the other hand, King Luca promised to never attack or be hostile against the Pope again, and erected in his honor the shrine of Calatafimi. And so, the dream of Asturzo, the dream of King Zaccaria the Catholic and King Umberto was finally achieved. The people of South Italy, united in language, culture, and history, were finally united under a single banner, which was not foreign. It was not Roman, Greek, Arabic, or Norman. It was a Sicilian banner, the banner of Asturzo and his kings, who with diligence, patience and humility, managed to build one of the most influential Mediterranean kingdoms that the Middle Ages ever saw, the Kingdom of Sicily.